almost threw them out of the carriage. The horses jumped and almost threw them out of the carriage. But anyway, they all went to school there. And Uncle James became a great scholar, author, high government position, and Mama then finished college when she was 18, and then went to Kentucky. She went to Kentucky to teach, and that's where she met my father.
All right, so before we get into that part, how many children were there on your mother's side?
Uh, uh, 3.
And they were?
Let's see, Uncle James, Robert, and Mama. The 3 of them.
And they all survived to adulthood?
Yes.
And Robert was the first to die. He died young, I believe.
Well, I don't really remember, but somehow they ended up being barbers, and so my father was a barber in Kentucky, in I guess the coal mines, and it was like.
Okay, no, we got to go back a second because we were talking about your mom's side. So with your mom's side, it was James, Robert, Carr.
Right.
Were there more or just the 3?
No, that was it.
Okay. All right. So let's trace them for a moment. Do you know anything about Robert?
No. No, I only know that he was a barber.
Okay.
In Knoxville, Tennessee.
All right.
And that's all I really know.
Okay. So you don't know did he have children or when he died? Or
no, I don't know.
Okay. So let's trace Uncle James for a moment. Talk about him, your Uncle James.
Right. Well, I say he finished college, and then he became a teacher and a professor. Several, they were starting some black colleges, which is known now as historically black colleges. And so he taught at several of those, and then started writing, and then he came to Washington, D.C., and had a big job, high-level job in government, and this was when they started, this was during the Depression now, and the WPA and so on, and so he worked in the government, and then he got, I guess, tuberculosis, and that's when he went to Denver for his health.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure where he met Aunt Elizabeth, but the 2 of them then ended up in Denver, and Uncle James was the first historian for the new Air Force Academy in Colorado.
Mm.
He was the first historian, and he wrote for the Denver Post, and he wrote his book called In the Age of Jim Crow, which I have here, and so they lived there in Denver from then on, and I was in Sierra Leone when Uncle James went into the hospital.
Okay, before we get to that part, so you said he wrote for the Denver Post. Was the Denver Post a white newspaper or black?
No, black. I mean white. Only one newspaper. They didn't have any black newspapers in those days. I think the Pittsburgh Courier was one of the first black newspapers.
All right, so he's a black man writing for a white newspaper, which is virtually unheard of back in those days.
That's right. That's right. And I said he later became the first historian for the new Air Force Academy.
And also, it has been mentioned that he was part of what was called Roosevelt's Black Cabinet. In other words, there was some people that would
No,
give advice?
no, no, that wasn't it. There was no, to my knowledge, there was no black cabinet that advised Roosevelt. But Roosevelt, again, the Depression, and he came up with all of these relief type programs from WPA, and that's the Mama worked with the as a teacher at the WPA, and but I'll get to that later.
All right, but was there not some connection between him and Eleanor Roosevelt? Because I heard that from several other sources.
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay.
Not to my knowledge.
All right. So he was a very distinguished black man to be able to do the things that he did.
Yes.
Even to work for the, well, going back, his father even working for the post office as a black man way back then
Right.
was quite exceptional.
That's right.
And then for James to have the type of education that he had back then, and then to be able to do the scholarly things that he did back then were quite exceptional.
Right. Right.
Okay, let's get into, before him going into the hospital, let's get into one of your favorite subjects, Aunt Elizabeth.
Aunt Elizabeth. Aunt Elizabeth was, first though, she was, I would have to say she was fat. She was big and very commanding and, you know, jumping ahead, but when we were there and we'd be at the table and she would say something and Uncle James would just sort of smile. He never responded, but then he would go to his little den as a retreat where he did his work and so on. But Aunt Elizabeth was a couple of incidents I remember. Well, see, it's you know, because my sister Lillian stayed with them, with Uncle James and Aunt Elizabeth. But I remember Aunt Elizabeth, I was there in Washington, I guess just for the summer. And I went into the kitchen and went to go to the refrigerator. Boy, don't you go to that refrigerator until you wash your hands. Go wash your hands. Where do you think you're coming from? And another time when my friend and I had been to New York and then came back to Washington, and I had saved enough money to get back to Franklin, but he'd spent his money. So I went to Aunt Elizabeth, Uncle James, and I say Uncle James, he was always just there, just sort of smiling. And I said, we need some money so we can get back home. And she just broke up laughing. Hey, boy, what do you think you're doing? How did you think you were going to get back home? Maybe I ought to just let you stay here. But then she did give us the money. So that was, but then later when she got sick.
Well, before getting sick, just a few more stories, because I remember hearing your two brothers, Leon and James, wanted to take Lillian somewhere, and Aunt Elizabeth was sort of against Lillian going out with them at that time.
Right.
You remember that?
Well, yeah, hearing about it, you know, they took her out, and I don't know, maybe got back, I don't know, 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, and Aunt Elizabeth was very upset because they kept her out so late, and so, no, she didn't have a great relationship with Leon and James because of Aunt Elizabeth. But, Lillian was there for 2 years with Aunt Elizabeth, and finally she escaped. She escaped to go to Ohio State. Right.
Now, what do you remember the particulars of how Lillian ended up with Aunt Elizabeth in the first place?
Well, no, I said Aunt Elizabeth and Uncle James, they were here in Washington. And Mama went to visit them several times. So when she went to visit them, Aunt Elizabeth, Uncle James said, well, why don't you let Lillian come here for a while? and so that's how she got there. But also, Aunt Elizabeth was saying to Mama and Daddy about us, why don't you send them to Washington and they can go to that fine school for black people, the Dunbar High School, and that's where the real intellectual children go. And you're growing up in that little town in Franklin, and send them here to Dunbar. And Mama said, no, no, thank you. We'll stay where we are. But no, that's how Lillian then got there, because I guess several times, you know, I remember, I guess I was probably about 14 the first time Mama took me to Washington. And so, and then Lillian, of course, and then when Leon and James moved there, that's how Lillian got involved with Aunt Elizabeth.
Now, very few people does Grandma talk about in a negative way, but I got the impression Grandma didn't really like Aunt Elizabeth a lot.
No, I wouldn't put it that way. Uh, she saw that her husband, Uncle James, was henpecked. I'll use that term, and she didn't like that. No, they got along all right, but no, she didn't necessarily admire